Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. We are back on the dev server and we are having a look at another airplane which is coming to the game. Seems like this kind of update is very focused on naval stuff with the big battleships and also SAM systems for the highest echelon of ground. One of the areas though, which I'm guessing is going to be overlooked, is the fact that we're getting a Swiss air subtree for Germany, which solves a lot of the issues that Germany has in their jet area. They're adding a Hunter, they're adding an F5, a Mirage, the Hornets as well, just so you have basically good vehicles and also CAS elements that you can run with a bunch of different lineups. And I thought in this video, we would have a look at them. You have the Mirage 3S C.70. Now this is a Mirage 3, but it has access to some weird and wonky weaponry. We nowadays in War Thunder have a bunch of different Mirages. You have obviously ones in the Israeli tree with stuff like the Nesha and even the Shahak, the Mirage 3CJ. You have some in the French tech tree with vehicles like the Mirage 3C, E, and even the 5F. Then you have others, such as the Mirage 5BA for Belgium in the French tech tree. And now Germany gets its own Mirage too. This 3S C70 differs from the other threes by its weaponry and also its survivability. And I generally think it's actually going to come in and be pretty fun if all of its weaponry works. And that's a huge if, big if, because right now it doesn't work. So on the dev server, stuff doesn't always work properly. So we're basically looking at it from a point of view of hoping it's going to work properly. But just to let you know, it is a dev server. It's a testing environment. Not everything works. So this vehicle, the Mirage 3, it has access to the Snec Rotan 9C, which you should be useful if you played some of the other Mirages. It has an afterburner with over 6,000 kgf. You also have the Serrano BIS radar, which isn't great. It's definitely on the lower end of useful radars. But as a person who has recently been playing a lot of F4s, the Kernas, the F4E, stuff on that level, I've come to respect that you can make these radars work, especially at these lower BRs like this vehicle is at 10.3, because people don't really think that they're going to get hit by semi-actives, and then a semi-active comes out of nowhere. So the pilot also has quite a lot of pretty cool stuff. It has a pretty good RWR with the Mirage detector. You also have the CCIPs and CCRP for the bombs, and even if the RWR doesn't show you the threat or doesn't, go too well, you always have the maneuverability of the Mirage to be able to get away from stuff. Also, you have some guns. So you do have the guns that are on this machine. It's a little bit odd because you can see how they're kind of glitching inside of a fuel tank. So you can actually remove the guns from this. I was trying to work out how to say it, but you can actually remove the guns from this and then add kind of like pod to it. So a little bit of like a fuel tank, and that I think is what's glitching, which you won't see on other vehicles. There's the fuel tank itself, but what you can do is, as I said, you obviously take the gun. You don't need the extra fuel tank unless you are a crazy person. And the great thing about War Thunder is you can be a crazy person. So if you decide the guns aren't for you, you can actually do that. So yeah, it has access to the 30mm. These are not that much different from the other ones. These are the FLZ Can 65 cannons. The great thing about Switzerland is they do exactly the same thing as the Swedish. They take other people's stuff and rename them. So you have to remember the damn names in Swiss or French or German, depending on which area you are talking about when it comes to Switzerland. So good stuff. Thank you, everybody. Thank God we have universal stuff nowadays, because my God, learning the same thing over and over and over again in different languages is very, very dull. Now, this also has some big old fuel tanks, so you're not going to run out of fuel anytime soon if you don't want to. And then it has some fun weaponry. So let's talk about this. What does this thing have access to? Well, first of all, it has like the extra booster. This is pretty standard when it comes to the actual machine, right? So you have the liquid propellant rocket booster, but usually you don't see this because normally you have to bring the fuel tank with it, so therefore you have to drop the guns, which I'm guessing is something you're going to have to do with this machine, but right now it doesn't work like that, so you can bring the booster and the gun, so that's a little bit odd. So you have the booster without the fuel, so I'm guessing it just doesn't work. And then you have this. So you have the FLZ LWF LL 6375 CWA. Now, this, to me, looks like an AIM-9E. And it might be slightly different, or it might be a copy-paste. This might just be the Swiss variant of the AIM-9E, but it looks very much like it has the same stats as it, and generally will just act the same. So it has two very close to, if not the same, as AIM-9Es. Then it gets a new missile. Now, this is really interesting in terms of it. This is the FLZ LWF LL 6479 FALCON missile. Now, you may have heard stories about an American missile that exists, okay? One which is infamous for, obviously not being very good. And it looks like the missile might be coming into the game in a slightly different format. So you can see here, it's called the FALCON, which leads us to the AIM-4, which was the kind of failed missile that didn't really go anywhere for America. The major issue with the AIM-4 was the fact that it didn't have a proximity fuse, or at least most of them, and it was designed to actually hit a target to be able to take it out. And if you've ever used the Stinger on stuff like the Ocelot or on other vehicles, you know that proximity fuse Stinger is so much better than the one that has to directly hit, just because it's such a pain to go through. Now, the FALCON did have a few variants which had proximity fuses, and this one is actually the upgraded version of the FALCON. So it's not the AIM-4, it's the AIM-26A. Now, I don't think this is the 26A actually, or at least in the game, I hope it isn't, because I'm pretty sure the A version was the nuke version, which wouldn't be great, but there's the B version, which I believe is in the files, which I believe is supposed to be that missile. So basically, it's a semi-active radar homing missile, which has pretty good overload, it has a pretty good launch range, pretty good speed, but not great guidance time, as you can tell. So this is a little bit different from a lot of semi-actives, but it's also at 10.3 in the game. And I wonder how well that's actually going to do compared to a lot of other missiles. As I said, though, it doesn't work yet, though. So we can't really, I can't really tell you how good it's going to be, because it just doesn't seem to be working. Then you have some 450s that you can bring on. They are eating each other, basically centipede style, so they're going to have to redo that. These have 236 kilos of TNT equivalent on the Springer bombs, which is a great name. And then also you have the FLZ LWF LB 66, which to me looks like an AS-30 Nord. So it's another one of these missiles, which, yeah, it literally says right there, Nord Aviation AS-30. So it's another one of those renamed wonderful missiles. So technically, you can take quite a funny loadout. You can bring the AS-30, which is the big missile, which is designed for air-to-ground with 100 kilos of TNT equivalent. And then you can bring the Falco missiles and then also the Siwa missiles on top of it. And at 10.3, having that loadout might actually be pretty fun. You know, AIM-9Es, okay, they're not the best, and they're more like setup missiles, especially at this BR, where you're going to run into a lot of vehicles which are, got countermeasures and also maneuverable, but you might be able to catch people out with the Falcon missiles, and I want to see how they actually work, since I've been looking forward to seeing them in the game for a long time. Now, this is the modifications right now. I feel like this is going to change because it just looks weird. You know, they're not using all the columns. Everything just seems a bit all over the place. So yeah, we have just standard flight performance and survivability, flares and chaff. This thing has 30 countermeasures and then 15 large caliber countermeasures, which may not seem like a lot, but at 10.3, that's plenty. You're not going to run into too many vehicles where you need more. The only ones which are going to be a bit of a pain for that are stuff such as if you get fully up-tiered into certain vehicles. Like, for example, if you run into like the F4E or the Kernas or something, which has a lot of missiles on it, but generally that'll be enough, right? And then also it just kind of like fires down in single sets, so then you can turn away. and go from there. Now, the external fuel tanks give you 40 minutes worth of fuel. So what you can actually do on this thing is you can run it with really low fuel in the actual vehicle itself, and then just take the externals, and then when you get close to the fight, drop the externals, and then become super maneuverable as you go around, which actually would be really cool to do, but unfortunately that doesn't seem to be happening. So also, as I said, the radar, 28 kilometers, as long as there's not too much like stuff behind it, you're able to actually lock onto stuff pretty easily. I have the Falco set up here, but I can't fire it. So yeah, there's definitely a problem with the Falco right now. It doesn't fire, which kind of sucks, but hopefully on future versions of the dev server, it will be able to fire, and I think that's pretty cool. It says the booster can't be switched on as well because you actually need the fuel in the front of it where the guns are, so you shouldn't be able to actually put this booster on if you don't have the fuel in the front, but on some reason for this one, it does have that. So just to kind of show you these and how they seem like AIM-9Es, they don't slave to the radar, but they do have the open seek ahead, which would kind of tell me that it's an AIM-9E. You can also just kind of look at it and see what the writing is on it. As I said, it would be actually kind of cool if they want to put like the names of these things on it, which is what they're doing, and then actually put what it is next to it, so you can have like an equivalent, so you don't have to kind of guess. So the vehicle is basically a Mirage, you know, it's another kind of Mirage 3 that we have in the game, which has slightly different armament and should play slightly differently. And I think generally that's actually really cool, because I would prefer something like this with a different armament instead of exactly the same thing over and over again, which, you know, for certain nations, that's what you're kind of getting, where you have all the F5s, which once again slightly have different armament, but they're very similar in terms of like how they're set up. So yeah, that is a bit of an issue. In terms of like the radar, it does go up to like 90, but you're never going to use that. You also have different like setups where you can make it smaller or bigger, which is quite nice. But also you only have the search on it. And then, of course, you have the wonderful fun missile. You have the big boy, the Nord, which you'll be able to use on ground vehicles, and also you'll be able to direct in because it is an M-close missile. So if you ever want to try and hit something with this, you can do it pretty effectively as long as you're paying attention. So it isn't like IR guided, or it's not like you don't need a lock to guide it in. It's literally just M-close. So yeah, and it creates a massive boom if you're able to hit the target. So I'm looking forward to this vehicle. I want to see how it does. I enjoyed playing the Mirage 5 BA, and I'm pretty sure this one is on kind of the same level as it in terms of like what it has access to. The fact it has countermeasures just makes it so much nicer. The difference between the C and the E in the French tree is like night and day, and this one I'm sure will be similar to the E instead of the C because of that. The major thing this doesn't have is crazy good missiles, but maybe it will, especially with the Falcons, especially if the radar, you know, behaves itself and you can have a bit of fun in terms of like going after other stuff. So I am really looking forward to this machine. The Mirage is one of my favorite vehicles in terms of like the actual game, and having another one is always going to be fun. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.
I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Warthunder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem, Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.